So I'm just going to give a small little trigger warning here. Topics during this panel may mention suicide and depression. I'm not too sure the breadth and scope of those things, but I just wanted to give that notice out to anyone who might want to take a moment for themselves and skip out on this panel. You're welcome to do so. We have some activities there for you that you can do on the other side that you can explore with. But to introduce this panel, this group artfully brings to life the human experience through storytelling. And I am really excited to hear that Anastasia is going to be moderating for us. And really, I sat in on this panel meeting, and just the way that this group like goes about telling stories of other people is just it's something really to watch and to just be really impressed with. So I'm going to bring on Anastasia. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'm going to let you have the floor.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's panel. I'm really excited to be talking all about storytelling, #NoFilter, with this amazing group of panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to head right into the description of the panel. From behind the camera to center stage, these documentarians will share their perspective on the highlights and challenges of using narrative in the broader movement of digital well-being. Since the dawn of time, catalyzing change has rested on humanizing the issue at hand. Hear from these directors on how they navigated this challenge. So before I head into introducing the panelists, I'm going to do a quick little intro about myself. Hello, I'm Anastasia, as I said before. I go by she, her pronouns. I am a sophomore at NYU studying the intersection of sustainability, design, and well-being. I've been involved in mental health activism since my high school years, and I'm currently the host of both the Our Turn to Talk podcast, which is all about youth mental health, as well as the Our Turn to Talk documentary. So now I'm going to head into introductions for our panel. So first up, we have Maddie Freeman. Maddie is the creator of No So November, a movement that educates young people on the harms of social media on mental health and encourages young people to take a month-long detox from the platforms during the month of November. Her organization screens the short films she created in middle schools and high schools to make it accessible to all schools and students. Maddie, welcome. Next, we have Yoelle Gulko. Yoelle is director and creator of Our Subscription to Addiction, a short documentary that captures 3 youth digital wellness activists who have experienced the debilitating effects of social media and have now joined forces to spark a digital wellness movement. Yoelle, welcome. Next, we've got Aliza Kopans. Aliza is the co-founder of Technically Politics, an organization working to get youth voices into legislative conversations around tech regulation. She produced a docuseries capturing teens' experiences with the digital world and co-created a campaign that helped pass the California Kids Code. Her work revolves around creating a human, not screen-focused world. Welcome, Aliza. And lastly, we've got Ella Collins. Ella is an intern at Live More, Screen Less, a Minnesota nonprofit working to create digital well-being across the state of Minnesota. This summer, she worked on a series of youth-based videos along with other projects, which highlighted the struggles of youth with technology to form a sense of community. I'm so excited to be talking with not talking, I'll be asking you questions and you guys will be doing all the talking, but I'm really excited to hear all of your responses. I think we have a wonderful lineup of panelists here that have accomplished so much in such little time on Earth, which is insane. But yeah, it's an honor to be with you all. Just want to let you know that I admire every single one of your works. So, all right, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the questions, if that's okay. So this question is going to be for Maddie and Yoelle specifically. How did you both get into storytelling and what does it mean to you?
Want to go first, Yoelle?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Yoelle. I think my story sort of started, honestly, about a year ago. I had been always hearing about sort of social media and its impact from other people. For me, I started having social media when I was super young, maybe in middle school. And by junior year of high school, I realized that social media just was not for me. It made me feel like I was no longer in control of my time, my energy. So I essentially just decided to delete it. But beyond deleting social media, for me, I didn't really feel like I could do much more. I didn't know that there was a movement being built. I didn't know any of what we have here today. And essentially, flash forward to a year ago, I met with Emma Lemke, Aliza's co-founder. We both go to WashU right now, and she basically opened my eyes to this whole community of people that are actually creating solutions and developing solutions, and made me realize that I could actually have a say and a big part of what it means to be a part of the solution. And that's when I decided that I could best use my experience as a filmmaker. In the past, I've created a lot of documentary and short films around human connection, and I realized I could use sort of like hidden talent of telling stories about people to a movement that I care about so much that I honestly did not know it was even. I didn't know that there was like a digital well-being space. I didn't know any of these people, and I sort of became obsessed with meeting as many people as I could that were in this space. I set up called, I linked in stock like Maddie and Aliza both. I was like, hey guys, like saw you on the summit in 2020. Like, can we talk? I'm obsessed with what you've done. I think like I'm very grateful they've taught me so much. And I think it's been a long time coming, but I've definitely learned so much. And I'm grateful to be a part of the conversation. And now I feel like I have a lot better understanding of who's creating the movement. And for me, it's my job to sort of publicize that to the rest of our generation and tell sort of the stories of these incredible people so that everyone else can have access and be a part of the movement. Thank you.
That's awesome. I love hearing your whole backstory and where you are today with everything is incredible based off all of that. So that's awesome. Yeah, so I'm Maddie. It's great to see you all. And my kind of introduction into storytelling was kind of a very long-winded process with a lot of bumps in the road. But it kind of all started in early middle school. Obviously, like Yoelle, I was exposed to like social media platforms, and it was very popular in middle school. So I think we were kind of like the guinea pigs of that generation, just kind of using these tools without truly knowing much about them. And so that was around the time I started struggling a lot with mental health. And so through high school, I think those issues kind of progressed a little bit. Social media was more and more integrated into our lives, and I was struggling more and more with mental health. And then seemingly around that same time, a lot of my friends died by suicide. And so that was an extremely painful experience for me and for my community. And I think a lot of us just kept asking, like, why is this happening? Why is this happening to our grade? Why is this happening in Colorado? Why is this happening to us? Like, this is not normal. Like, we all have this list of like 10 friends that we've lost. And it just felt really scary. And like, that was the world we were living in. And that it was like normal that was like an option for people, you know? So that's really what jump started me getting involved in being a mental health activist. And that's ultimately what led me to being a digital well-being activist as well. So I started working with my old high school district to implement more mental health resources because I just didn't feel like they were doing enough after all of these deaths to support students. And so I was like, I just want kids that attend those high schools now to have resources that I didn't have available to me when I was struggling. And so we created a bunch of I was just coming up with all these ideas. I was working with the mental health team, and we implemented some really cool stuff. And then right around that time, I watched The Social Dilemma, and it just kind of flipped a switch in my head and made me feel like maybe this was part of the reason why this kept happening. Maybe this was part of the reason why the mental health crisis is so bad. Like, social media obviously has negatively impacted my life, and I can see that it's impacted people around me's lives too. So that's really what pushed me into this realm, is I just saw that correlation with mental health and social media, and it really lit a fire inside of me. And I feel very lucky to be working on this issue and have gotten so many incredible opportunities. Like, again, Look Up has mobilized No So November, my organization, in more ways than I can count. And Susan Reynolds very early on definitely had a lot of faith in me in being a storyteller. And I think my story stuck out to her, and that's why she wanted to kind of help elevate what I was doing. And so I'm forever grateful for that. And it's been a really, really cool experience for sure. So that's kind of my story.
I mean, you all are just the coolest. Like, I can listen to all of you speak for days and days on end. Thank you so much for sharing. And the second question is pretty similar to the first, but we're going to give a chance for Ella and Aliza, and also Maddie, if you want to pitch in to speak on this. But why did you feel there was a need to begin storytelling in this space?
I can kick us off on this one. Thank you so much for being such an amazing moderator, and such an honor to speak alongside so many really incredible activists in this field. So my project, Technically Politics, involves getting youth voices into legislative conversations around tech regulation. And as the first generation to grow up with phones in our pockets from elementary school onwards, I believe that we deserve to have a place in these conversations as laws are being made that are going to govern how technology companies are able to interface with their younger users for generations and generations to come. And so one of the most effective ways that myself and Emma Lemke, co-founder of Technically Politics, thought to do this was through storytelling. And so to humanize all of this data that's coming out about increased mental health struggles, increased suicide rates, as Maddie was talking about, that are very correlated with the rise of social media and digital tech in general. And I think it can be really easy, especially for people who aren't living through it, to write off those numbers as just numbers and not think about the human lives behind them. And so using storytelling as one means of uplifting voices of young people, as we are real alive people living through this, and we don't want to be passive victims of it. We are here to use our voices and take steps of courageous vulnerability to enact change here. And so really working on creating a storytelling platform that makes space for people to share their stories. And then also to highlight the ways that social media and technology infiltrates our lives in smaller ways that might not lead to big mental health struggles, but the mere fact of having to accept privacy policies to sign up for a platform for school and feeling so uncomfortable with where is my data going and what are they collecting about me, that baseline is not okay too. And so trying to capture some more of the more nuanced experiences of young people, and using storytelling and documenting these testimonials in a visual and audio format to really educate adults and parents, lawmakers, people with some more political and social sway than we as young people have, to join our movement and ally with us and support the work we're doing in the fight for a more humane tech future.
Thank you so much for sharing. Maddie, do you want to pitch in at all?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. That was an I don't know how to follow up on that. That was incredible. But I personally, like, for me, storytelling was really crucial to speak to the younger generation, and by that I specifically mean, like, my target age group with my program is middle schoolers and high schoolers. I think that storytelling and kind of getting on their level and being like, I understand you. I'm also young. I know what you're experiencing. I know, like, not exactly, but I can imagine what you're experiencing. I know what it's like to grow up on social media and kind of have their backs when all of their teachers and the staff and the administration at their schools did not grow up in that. They did not understand what that was like for them, and they still don't, even if they're on social media now. They don't know what it's like to have it shape your teenage years. Like, that's a very unique experience. And so for me, I thought it was very important to have that youth to youth standpoint where I can get on their level and be like, I was in high school not too long ago. Like, I know how it feels. I know what it's like. And, like, here's a solution for it. And then on the other hand of that, it's like, this isn't taught in schools that much. And social media is invading the fabric of our lives in every way. And so it's like, why is that not being taught in school? But, like, other topics are, if that makes sense. So it's like, I think that sharing my story with a young audience and allowing them to learn about these issues and have a solution for them is really it's really important, since a lot of adults aren't doing that for them. So I think that's where, like, I find my value in this space, and it's nice because I think younger people definitely connect more with people that they feel like are on their level and genuinely understand how they feel, rather than an adult being like, no, get off your phone. Like, I think there's a very different feeling to that. So that's kind of how I feel in that situation.
Yeah, I think what's so powerful about what you all are doing is that you're making it all accessible, and you're actually speaking about things that have been either suppressed or avoided for so long, and you're speaking the hard truths, and you're making other people feel heard too, because, like you all said, these feelings of, oh, social media doesn't make me feel so good, or a little bit more anxious, or it's a waste of time, it's all mutual. Like, we all experience it or have experienced it when we were on social platforms. So that's really amazing. Ella, I see you've joined us. Are you able to speak on this question? If you would like me to rephrase or re-ask it, let me know.
Could you re-ask it, please? I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Basically, it's just why did you feel there was a need to begin storytelling in this space?
So the need that we found was the fact that there's not really a big sense of community around things. We really based it around trying to create something that other students could relate to. One of the big questions that we were phrasing is, what does your phone mean to you? So, oh gosh, hang on. I'm so sorry. The only venue that I could find for this was a cafe that just so managed to close right as we were starting this. So the main thing that we were trying to figure out, though, is how do we create a sense of community and use this as something that other students can relate to and to create that portion of it.
Love it. Thank you. I'm glad you were able to pitch in your answer. We missed you for a sec. Okay, so this next question is directed at Maddie. How did you navigate deciding how to tell these stories?
Yeah, it was tough. There was a lot of bumps in the road along the way for this. The topic of suicide is just generally a tough thing to talk about, and a tough thing to talk about to different audiences. Like, I need to speak about that issue very differently to a group of middle school students than I would a group of college students, you know? So it's like, also as a young person, I feel like I'm kind of being put in a position that I need to be very careful about kind of the way I come off and the things I say. Like, even just saying like suicide and social media are correlated, but it's not causational necessarily. Like, there's so many like little caveats to things like that. So for me, it tended to be a little difficult to tailor my message, and I definitely get a little bit anxious sometimes, feeling like what I would say would get taken out of context, which has happened a few times in some media experiences I've had, which has been like a good learning lesson. Like, having a lot of media interviews and stuff like that, and like documentary type stuff, like they can kind of cut out like the parts they want from you. And so like I guess it's been tough to kind of have to be very like precise about the things I'm saying, but at the same time, it's been cool to kind of fine tune my message. Like, I think at the beginning it was really hard because it was just like, I didn't know if I should say the names of the people who passed away. Like, I didn't know how, like, if I should talk about the number or not, or like, just there's so many issues surrounding that. So I don't know. I think it's been cool though, because it's been like 3 years since I've been in this space, and now I feel like I fine-tuned that message and I'm able to speak about it without kind of hiding it. Like, suicide needs to be talked about, mental health needs to be talked about, because it's a huge issue and a ton of people deal with it. Like, 1 in 3 people struggle with mental health. So I find that it's important to talk about it, but in the right way. And so I feel like I've found that balance now, which feels really good. But yeah, that's just something that I think I've struggled with a little bit along the way.
Yeah. Speaking of struggles, Yoelle, I'm going to pass this question on to you. Filming a documentary is an incredibly complex process. Having been on one end of it, it's insane. And so many things go into it, from which subjects to choose to how to tell the story, what shots to film, everything. So what were some obstacles that you faced in your creation process?
Yeah, it's definitely no easy journey. I think I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it for anybody that isn't just like flat out just super passionate about what they're doing. Sometimes I just get into something without realizing what like it will take. And I think that's sort of the beauty in it also, because you end up learning so much through that process. And for me, I think one of the biggest takeaways, like with every obstacle that I face, is I come away feeling like I'm that much stronger because of it, because I've had to learn so many just like random things. Like, I think a little backstory, Maddie is actually one of our interviewees for the film. We flew her out with things to look up and their sponsorship um, to film. And literally during our filming process, my SIM card cut out. And I was like, hold that thought, Maddie. Let's backtrack while I figure out how the SIM card works. And so just sort of like, I thank her for her patience with me on that. But I think that's just a small example of how um, mistakes will happen and things will inevitably come up. But it's really just about learning as much as you can and having that sort of like fail fast, fail hard mindset through that. So you end up becoming so much more versatile, because then in the next interview I did after her, I realized that I can actually be that much more prepared. Like, I took extra SIM cards in advance. And I think so sort of other obstacles I was encountering was, you mentioned some of them. Picking stories is really hard as well. We conducted over 30 interviews to figure out, maybe 5 people that are going to be featured in this film. And I think that's still something we're working through, but sort of being very intentional and having criteria through which we select candidates, and also just making sure that we're maintaining a relationship with them. If they're not in the film, we still want to make sure they're part of our movement, they're a part of our campaign, and sort of maintaining those relationships, I think, has been a super important lesson that I've learned. And I think through all of that, a big takeaway for me was just like what it takes to stay motivated in a project like this. There's going to be, I'm sure, like with Maddie, Eliza, Ella, like all of you have so many obstacles that you run into as well. It's really coming back to what infrastructure will you set up to sort of continue to motivate you through that process, because otherwise you're just more likely to give up. And I think for me, some of the key pillars of what's kept me motivated was my mentor Bree, from the Social Dilemma through Lookup, has been incredible in helping me through those obstacles. I literally spoke with her yesterday. She's great. I had so many obstacles to share with her. I think number two is having people on your team that inspire you. I spent a lot of time recruiting people that I thought had the same passion that I did for this project. So when it came time for me to be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, am I even doing this right? I could fall back on them and to re-inspire me and remind me why I'm working on this. And even like in our Slack channel, we have a wins channel, because people can go back and like look at some of the wins along the way so that we could be continually inspired by what we do. So that's a little bit about me and overcoming obstacles.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. And I think that definitely exemplifies resilience because, again, being able to navigate a process that's so complex so smoothly and be in such a problem solving mindset is crucial. And I think that you exhibited that super well and provided some great advice for our audience. And we actually just received an audience question. This isn't planned, so whoever wants to pitch in to answer, please feel free to do so. But at Miss Cates asks, how do you capture the attention of an audience whose attention span is lessening? I think that's a really interesting question because, you know, we're the first generation to have grown up on social media, on phones, and our attention span literally has lessened to, I think it's now like what, on average 8 seconds or something. So was that something that you took into consideration as you were working on your films and your general projects, or not so much? But yeah, what are your general thoughts about this?
This is such a difficult question, I think, especially when you're trying to convey a big message or compel people into action. Usually that content needs to be longer than 8 seconds. And so as I was creating my docuseries this summer, and it was intended for both young people to watch and hopefully be compelled and empowered to use their voice, and also for adults who maybe sometimes have a longer attention span. And so figuring out how to strike that balance. And I think little trailers and snippets are so imperative to get people hooked and open their eyes to, this is a project or a video or content out there, and here's the longer thing to watch. And this is a 10-second trailer of it, and also text as well. And so figuring out how to share the project that you're working on in a way that in those brief snippets, and so through compelling text or some of those more flashy designs and something that will let people stop in the middle of their Instagram or TikTok reels and feeds and pause and consider what you're putting out there, and then to redirect them to something that is a little bit longer and build that in with a community and with action. So it's not just this sort of passive of watching and moving on to the next thing, I think is really effective.
I can also pitch in on this. The series that we made was specifically geared towards high school age students. So as most of us know, probably most of us are fresh, all of us are fresh out of high school. At least on this panel, we don't have very long attention spans. So that was something that we definitely had to work with. I was working with 2 youth directors, one of whom had just graduated from college, one of whom had just graduated from high school. So they were awesome working through with that. But just figuring out those obstacles and making it in a format and figuring out how to distribute it was another thing that we really struggled with, was how do we actually get this so that it gets in the hands of as many young people as we possibly can? Because that was part of our thing that we were thinking about, was how do we get people to give this enough attention that they want to then be brought to more resources and to use those.
Maddie, Yoelle, you guys want to add to this, or should I move on?
I can say a quick thing. I think this is something I think about a lot. I'm still in story development mode. I think as my assistant director and I are looking back at our footage now and trying to iterate sort of what we have into a digestible format, something that I sort of hold dear in my filmmaking process is sort of having an experimentalist angle with it and trying to make my footage and like the shots as weird and unusual as possible to sort of capture someone's attention. So maybe it doesn't necessarily mean having shorter shots, but from an editing perspective, maybe it means having a variety of pacing, right? So cutting them in ways that maybe have a series of like super fast shots and then it slows down. So that way you don't maybe need an 8-second video, but you can have, say, a 5 to 10 minute video that's really engaging simply by the variety of shots visually and the pacing of it all. So I think there is a way to be intentional with it and have a unique perspective in the way that you're creating shots. When I'm thinking about B-roll, I'm not thinking about, filming Maddie on her phone. I'm thinking, what would Maddie like feel if she was talking about something as horrible, as suicide, things like that. Like, what's a way to sort of describe something metaphorically without being entirely explicit to sort of keep that audience engagement and keep the audience thinking about what could be ultimately the deeper message of the film. And that way you're less likely to lose them.
Loving these insights. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to hop back onto the questions that we had figured out beforehand. So these are for Yoelle and Aliza. How do you navigate picking testimonials, and what are some of your considerations? And also, just out of personal curiosity, and I think also the audience would be curious about this as well, how do you take care of your own mental health as you're going through these testimonials and you're learning about and interviewing these different subjects, learning about a lot of the traumatic things that they've gone through?
Yoelle, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. I think this is like one of the hardest questions. Like, who are you going to pick for this film? There's only so many people you can have in it. Definitely a lengthy process. I mentioned a bit about it before, but I think in my answer, I sort of want to highlight a key consideration I've never really worked with before, which was sort of having a diversity of voices in this film. And to be quite frank, that's not something I'd ever really considered prior as a filmmaker. I sort of thought of who I wanted in the film and I just went for it. But I was told this by Bree, my mentor from The Social Dilemma. She said, it's really important to think about like what faces aren't maybe seen so far, or what experiences and stories have we not yet heard in the people that you've chosen. So that way any person, any young person that's watching themselves or watching the film can see a part of themselves in one of these testimonials. And that was honestly, I knew it was really important feedback, but it's something that kind of crushed me because I thought I knew who I was filming until she said that. And I was like, you're right, I do not have diversity in these voices, and I'm going to need to go back to the drawing board and start over. And I'm so grateful she told me to do that because I ended up going on LinkedIn and like reaching out to, I think it was 50 people, just like of all diversity of backgrounds. And I ended up being connected to like a few people that were incredible in elevating our film. We secured a potential like distribution channel simply because we tried to find ways that were different and were representing different voices and could reach a variety of people. So I would really like, even if it's harder, I would encourage every storyteller to think about what perspectives are different from yours or different from the ones you have so far, and really consider that. In terms of mental health, just for me, just like taking breaks when I need to, maybe being aware of when I need space. I remember it's funny because I feel like I'm almost numb to Maddie's story now, having heard it so many times. But like, it is a horrible, like tragic procession of events. And I'm editing her footage now. I just showed it to my assistant director, Leah, and she was like, "This is horrible." Like, we paused it because she like needed a moment. I was like, "I'm so sorry. Like, I've seen this so many times. Like, I feel like I don't even experience." And I think that was honestly very insightful to me to think about as an editor, how will my audience feel about this? How is their mental health going to be upon listening to the story? Because, if I've heard it so many times, maybe it's worth thinking about how to position this in a way that maybe isn't the most dramatic angle, but the most thoughtful and intentional and respectful angle for both the story and the viewer.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you said, and so hard to sift through so many amazing stories and figure out how to step away from your own bias and perspective and try to enter the perspective of your audience, which I think is especially difficult when you're not quite sure who's going to be engaging with this content. And so over the past year, I interviewed 65 young people, mostly on campus here at Brown, and I had to choose 30 of those videos. And that was a really difficult process, and figuring out how to shape each one into a greater story, but also let that individual's voice be heard, very challenging, and lots of hours of puzzling all the pieces around. And my amazing video editor, who is a fellow lookup innovator in our cohort, Ryan, was so tolerant of me constantly taking people out or moving things around. And in my docuseries, I released 6 different short films, and 5 of those were under this different theme. And so grouping it by themes was really helpful for me of kind of thinking of a more streamlined process, and how can each of these smaller episodes, of course, contribute to the larger story, but also paint their own picture through a series of voices. And then in terms of taking care of myself, most of the people that I interviewed, their stories were not super attached to deep mental health crises or bigger struggles. And so I'm grateful in that sense that I didn't have to figure out how to deal with that secondhand trauma in this regard of work that I'm so passionate about. And then I think that can be really hard to figure out that balance of how much do I continue engaging in this when I really believe in it versus when do I take time for myself. But I think with any work and with any social justice movement, I saw in the chat Kate put earlier, is celebrating those small wins. And when you get an email back from someone, or when you have just a really amazing conversation, or your content resonates with somebody, that's so important, and to hold on to that. And then also to continue coming back to your values. And it's really glitzy and glamorous to get external praise on this stuff. And also that's only sustaining for so long. So to keep thinking about why am I in this work and what's driving me, and if it feels like you're grasping for values there, to take some time to think about, okay, what's happened, what's shifted since I started in this space, and what do I need to do to either get back on track or to really give myself a break right now if I feel like I'm not going to be able to effectively contribute to this movement, both for myself and for other people.
Okay, someone get you guys the TED Talk stage. Like that was amazing. And it was honestly, I'm gonna add a little bit of my own thing super quick. But it was really refreshing and also reassuring to hear that, because as a podcast and documentary host who has had dozens, if not hundreds at this point, of conversations regarding really heavy, dense subjects, typically about mental illness and learning about people's darkest moments in their lives, like literally the thoughts that they were thinking when they wanted to take their own life. I mean, it is secondhand trauma, and you have to learn throughout that process how to take care of yourself. And like Yoelle, I also got to a point in my hosting career when I also started to feel a little bit numb, and it made me feel so upset with myself, because I was like, these people are opening up their feelings, their emotions, their traumas to me, and here I am sitting there taking it in, and I'm listening, but it's like blocking. There's like a barrier between us, and I don't truly feel for them anymore. And I mean, sure, sometimes it is important not to always be like super duper empathetic, because again, it can kind of extend past your personal capacity for taking in all of these things. However, I think something that's helped is truly being mindful every single time I have a conversation with someone, especially if it's about something as intimate as mental health, mental illness, because being mindful, it eliminates all of these other external thoughts of, oh, I've heard something like this before, or like, oh, this, I already know how this is going to end up, or like, oh, they healed this way, blah, 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 and like making assumptions about that person. Like it removes all judgment, all assumptions, preconceived notions when you're mindful, because there still is something to learn from someone else at the end of the day, no matter who it is, how many times you've heard a similar conversation. Every single person is individual and unique, which like I know is so overstated, but like when you truly absorb that message and apply it to every conversation, you do end up realizing that every single human being is interesting, and there's so much to unpack, and so many things, that so many insights that they have that you may have never gotten from someone else. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Back to the questions and back to all of you. So Ella, this is a question specifically for you. What does mental health look like for you in this space? Super general question, interpret it as you want and just go for it.
So I think this is actually going to be really interesting because I think both Yoelle, I think everyone here so far has touched on what mental health meant for them during their projects. And I think it's really interesting because I honestly had a different take as I was working on my project. We were pretty much cold calling individuals at a park and asking them to come sit down with us for 5 to 10 minutes and answer our questions. And for me, it was actually a really, really freeing experience, and allowing myself to be a part of something like that where I was allowing these individuals to open up to me. And then I think one of the best parts of the experience really was actually getting to see those individuals open up and quite literally like loosen. Like the people that, as we were interviewing them, they came down, obviously they were tense. We were asking these random people to come talk about something that's a really, really deep issue with us. But as they walked away, it almost looked as though a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. They were able to walk taller. Their answers got more confident as they went on, and just being able to give them a platform to talk about the things that are so passionate and such a core value of our society gave them that opportunity to lift that weight off their shoulders. And being able to give them that opportunity was really, really healing for me as a person, because I really, over the last year, through my entire freshman year of college, I really struggled with my mental health. And part of it was definitely due to technology, and giving those people that space and creating that community really helped me and just gave me a whole new perspective on my life, my social media usage, and my mental health.
That's a great point. Yeah, definitely directing some of your focus onto other people can be so critical in the healing process for yourself. Thanks for sharing, Ella. Okay, so we actually are getting several questions from the audience, so I'm going to dive into those. The first of which is, what was the most impactful language or phrase you heard while making your documentaries? Or was there something an interviewee said that changed your perspective? And this is from an anonymous viewer.
One common thread I found throughout the people I interviewed that was so impactful is the amount of times people mentioned the next generation. And so pretty much everyone I interviewed was under the age of 24. And here we are talking to people who are in the depths of college studies and have plenty of worries in their minds and hearts. And when I asked them what they want to see change about the way technology is designed and regulated, they started talking about their younger siblings and cousins, and then eventually their future kids. And we're all 20 years old. And that was really, really striking to me of not only are we concerned about the effects of social media and technology for ourselves, but we're already considering the implications that this is going to have for people who are growing up in a digital world from birth, and thinking about how imperative it is that we act now such that younger generations don't have to face the same kind of side effects and severe consequences that we have because of the impacts of social media.
Something that I found, well, because I've spoken to so many people of different ages on these issues, obviously, and a lot of them being my friends because they know I do this work. And so I always love to hear their perspective on things. And something that I think is very impactful in kind of a sad way is I very frequently hear, like, I know it's bad for me, but I still, like, I don't care, or I can't put it down, or it's bad for me, but it's fine, and I think it's interesting that we've shifted into the point where I think the general society at large understands the issues of social media a lot better than they did like a few years ago, because of films like The Social Dilemma and because of people like us doing this work and talking about these things. So I think it's interesting, like a lot of young people understand like social media does kind of make me feel bad about myself, or I do feel addicted to it and I know that it's designed to be that way, or like I know that when I'm depressed and I get on Instagram, it just makes me more depressed. Like they're aware, but it's scary to me that some people just, and I would say a majority of people feel that they still just can't get out of it. Like they're willing to put up with that. Oh geez, sorry. Sorry about that. They're willing to put up with that because of like the social aspect of it. And so like it reminds me of just like some of my friends who vape. They're like, I know it's like killing my lungs and I know it's awful for me, but like I don't want to stop. And it just sounds just like that for me. And it's just kind of sad to me that young people are kind of just being taken advantage of, and their psychology is being used against them, and that a lot of people feel that way, that like, yeah, I know it's really bad for me, but I just can't help it, because that's what it was designed to do, you know? And so I think that's another thing that really like keeps my fire going inside me. Like that kind of pisses me off. Like I don't, it makes me upset that so many people feel that way. And yet that was the intention of these social media developers. And so like it's kind of interesting to hear that from a lot of people. And then on the other hand, a lot of people end up taking action on that. And that's incredible. Like a lot of people I know, like they were like, I want to join NOSO, but I don't think I can this year. And now a lot more friends that like kind of have had a whole year to think about it are like, okay, I'm doing it this year. Like, you're right. Like, I know it's best for me. So I think overall people are tending to want to take action more surrounding this. And so, yeah, I found that very impactful when speaking to a lot of young people for sure.
All right, I'm going to move on to our last question of the panel. And I'm actually going to leave it to you all to decide which one you want to do, because we have two interesting questions and I couldn't decide. So one person from the audience, Kathy, asks, becoming numb to stories is an issue for viewers too, which I thought was really interesting. How do you figure out how much is too much? So we can answer that, or we can also answer, or we can answer, what is the main message you want to address through your storytelling? Or if you can quickly address both, do it, because I think both questions are phenomenal. So
I can try and, oh, do you want to go ahead, Yoelle? Okay, I can try and smush both of them into one answer. I think, as you all said, it's so important to be intentional and try and step into the shoes of your viewers and hold that empathy. And then think about what's going to be effective in achieving whatever your end goal is. And if it is, I know in legislation, oftentimes it is sharing these most dramatic stories that really pull at people's heartstrings, and lawmakers might not move unless they hear about all the young people who have taken their lives due to effects of social media, amongst other things. And not every single person, maybe for some people that's going to cause people to turtle up. And so figuring out, when, for example, with Maddie's initiative, like, not only are you sharing the stories of your friends, you're also making action and giving people an avenue for joining you in action, where they don't necessarily have to engage with stories that might cause them to retreat from participating in this movement. And so I think taking a bunch of different avenues and thinking about giving the people you're engaging with options so that they can choose what way feels best for them. And then for my work, I would say the main message is, as I've said briefly before, letting youth know that there is a space for your voice, and no matter how big or small your experience might feel, taking that step to share it with other people can really move forward this work that needs to happen right now and create a safer digital world for both us and then for those future generations. And then also open the eyes up to educators, to parents, to lawmakers about the little ways that technology is negatively impacting our lives, such that they will join us in fighting for this better future of tech.
Yeah, I think Eliza crushed it there. I think she's also a perfect example of like someone that has done so much change, especially like politically, like with the new like California legislation. Perfect example of like young people actually changing like the face of this movement. Super quick, going back to Kathy's question, I think in terms of like just too much, for me, it depends on audience, you know, and I think even Maddie touched on this too. Like if you're talking to middle schoolers screening this film in middle schools, likely the way you talk about suicide needs to be very intentional, and maybe it's not maybe saying the most overt details, because what I've actually realized looking at back at Maddie's story, with my assistant director, is you don't need all the graphic details to be personally touched by her story. And also, you know, you want to think about like what's the point of what you're trying to get across? Is it like to impress the viewer with how much like drama you can build, or is it to inspire them and focus on what, you know, the person is actually building? That's incredible, and focus more on the upside. I think for me that's a big focus, is focusing a little bit, which is important, of the why and the problem, but mostly on the solution, because that's what nobody sees and that's what is most important to for the viewer to see. And in terms of main message, I think for me, Maddie taught me this, and everyone else did around me, is number one, like the discovery that, this is not your fault. Like if you're addicted to social media, it really is just not entirely your fault. Obviously, you do have personal agency in deciding what that looks like for you. But just even watching The Social Dilemma, like these platforms are psychologically designed to be addictive. They're designed to be this way. And I think having that first realization is of the utmost importance to take the blame, part of the blame, away from yourself. And I think Maddie taught me this. I'm definitely putting this in my film, is number two is like you're not the victim, and sort of empowering yourself and realizing that you are uniquely equipped to be a part of the solution because you're a young person, because you have that experience. People think that you need to be an adult or whatever, have this experience as an adult to make change. You have to be a politician to make change. But us as young people, this is a very unique issue in which, because we are the experts on this issue, and that's why we are perfectly equipped to be a part of the solution now.
Those are such great points, Yoelle. Yeah, and I've definitely found that as well, that you don't need to be as dramatic or go into so much detail to impact an audience, and that's actually a huge thing that I realized and learned this year. Because I initially made my first short film. It was 15 minutes long, and then going back to attention span from earlier, I spent the last few months creating a new short film that's like just bigger and better and shorter. Also, I needed to make it shorter because of attention span. But I found that through the creation of the new short film, I wanted to speak a lot less on my story and more, like Yoelle said, about what you can actually do about it, and more about like ways you can take action. Because I think me kind of simply stating like, I lost a lot of friends to suicide, I think a lot of people can imagine what that was like. I think they can imagine the pain behind that. They can imagine that that's driving me, but I don't necessarily have to go into the details of like when this happened, why it happened, how it happened, all that. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't matter as much as what we can do to try to help ourselves and really like be a mental health advocate. And I think that's where I almost had to like draw the line of being a storyteller and being almost an educator, because I really strayed away from focusing too much on the suicide part of things, because I felt that it was more important to educate the audience on the harms of social media, how it's designed, how it's addictive, like studies showing ways that it can be bad for mental health. And I thought that giving the personal touch at the beginning is really important. And I think, again, that makes me relate to these young people a little bit more, but it's in a more tasteful way of like, that's really sad and they can imagine what I went through, but I don't want to traumatize the audience. I don't need to go in depth about that. It's important they understand my background, but it's more important for them to learn about the issues at hand. So that's definitely been like something I've learned and had to think a lot about in creating this new short film. So it's been cool, and I feel like I really did strike that balance. And this is something me and Yoelle talked about a lot as well. So it's really cool. The film's out on my website, so if anyone wants to watch it, I feel really good about it. So I think you could see the balance I'm talking about. But yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. And I'm going to quickly tell you all Ella's response, because unfortunately she's having some technical issues, but she said that her main message is that you are not alone, because it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And she wants to emphasize that creating a sense of community is an important thing in life, very important thing in life, and it can be attained by everyone. So I think that's a really great note to end on. I think last thing we're going to do is just drop your handles, your website links, all of that. So if you all could go around and share really quick where everyone can find you so that they can keep up to date on all of the amazing work that you're doing. We'll finish it off on that.
And while you all are dropping that in the chat, again, thank you so much for telling the stories that need to be told and for changing some of the ideas and thoughts and stigmas behind these topics that we're looking at. And really, like, again, I just am so grateful to share some of your presence. Like, I don't know you that well, but I know you well enough that I am so thankful to be able to say, like, you know what, I know someone in the space who wants to tell your story, and to be able to connect that. Like, I feel so much I feel empowered just from listening to you all. And I'm much older than you. So, that's saying something that you are generating that change. So thank you so much for being here. We will wish Ella our best. I'll make sure to let her know that she was just as much loved on as you all are. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go into our next break, and we'll catch up in a little bit. So as we're doing this, bye everyone. I actually have a quick snippet of a documentary from Commercial Connection, which is from an innovator of ours. I'm going to show you their 5-minute snippet clip. You're welcome to watch it now, or you can jump over to the expo booth, watch it there, and then further connect with them that way. So I'll go ahead and start playing that, and then take a moment to do a little stretch break, get some water, go to the bathroom, do what you got to do, grab a snack, and then we'll be all set. So we'll see you in a few minutes.
I think being off of social media has made me feel like an outcast in a way. Like I have major FOMO because I don't know what's going on, and especially with trends and like popular artists or even what's going on in my friends' lives, I don't really see what they're doing, and it makes me wonder what they're doing, or I realize that I forget about those friends and I forget about what is going on in their life. I think like being on social media at such a young age and expecting comments or expecting a certain amount of likes or having so many followers has played a role in confidence in general, and not having all of those comments, all of those likes has changed and shifted how I see confidence. I think the pressure and judgment on social media has affected my dancing, and being off of social media has reduced it because I feel like not as many eyes are on me and I don't feel the judgment of others as much. It mainly affects my mindset, and because the mind is connected to the body, it makes me like get off my leg or get distracted and not focus on myself. I think goals now have become more personal and more internal. Before this month, I think exercising was more for my physical appearance and how I came off to others. Whereas now, when I exercise, I think about like how am I benefiting my body and how am I making it healthier. And even like with nutrition, I think about what's benefiting me directly, not other people or how I look to other people. I definitely feel more confident in myself, and I've found that I find confidence more just like self-reassurance rather than the reassurance through others.
Hey, I'm Ryan, the Creators Project, and thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in checking out the whole 20-minute piece when it's finished, click that blue register interest button and we'll be able to add you to a little email mailing list and send it to you when it's finished. But if this story really resonated with you, like reach out to me. Honestly, we're looking for people to partner with and just different ways that this story can have an impact. So especially if you're a student, we would love to be able to spread the story to different schools. So please reach out, please talk to me. I would love to talk and think about how we can work together. Besides that, thanks for giving me the time. Thanks for watching and take care. Peace.